for the first time. Great. Okay. So for people who are new here, the speaker series came out of two impulses. The first was to set up a platform for researchers studying this important cultural moment between breaking's debut at the Olympics, at the Youth Olympics, sorry, and its future at Paris 2024. Secondly, we really wanted the series to open up a conversation to bring together researchers, practitioners, and community members to share what they know. And so we could be in conversation, collaborate, and modulate our thinking by, working through ideas together and giving each other sort of a helping hand to process all the different stances and responses to breaking becoming part of the Olympics. We'd originally intended this to be a small forum for exchange for the authors who submitted abstracts to be part of the special issue on breaking in the Olympics for the journal Global Hip Hop Studies to be published in 2023. So the speaker series is really an opportunity for everyone to present their research in progress so that any blind spots and anything that's missing can be seen. And we can just, grow together as a community and share, and it's essentially just a safe space for ideas, and it's not the final say on any of this work, so it shouldn't be taken as such. Before we do move on, though, I'd like to first quickly shout out Adam Hupt and Griff Rolifson for giving us the space to explore this critical moment in the special issue of Global Hip Hop Studies first and foremost, and to the Cypher Project for the continued support of the speaker series. In today's session, we'll be looking at a little bit more of the sports science element behind breaking in the Olympics and its the athleticism component. I guess we'll just get started with our first presenter, Nefeli Tsiouti, who is the founder of Project Breakalign, an international research project for breakers and hip hop dancers, specializing in physical conditioning and injury prevention, which was established in 2013. Project Breakalign research lectures and therapy have taken place around the world at universities, conferences, and at events like Catch the Flavor, Outbreak, Red Bull BC1, IBE, Street Style Lab, and more. Breakalign is partnered with the USA-based non-profit Child of This Culture, and currently Nefeli is serving on the board of directors of the International Association for Dance Medicine and Science and works as a scientific collaborator at European University Cyprus, a PT at Advanced Medical Center, and as a breaking, strengthening, and conditioning teacher in dance schools. So without further ado, take it away, Nefeli.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. Can you hear me, first of all? Yeah, okay. Okay, can you see my sharing of my screen as well? Oh, wait. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, thanks for the introduction. It's great to be here. I'll just get started. So I'll be talking today about performance optimization and injury prevention in breaking with reference to the Brakeline methodology. So I'll be explaining all of this as we move along. So I'll just give you a little background about myself. So I started as a ballet dancer more than 2 decades ago, and I slowly discovered hip hop, kind of got into hip hop breaking, which at some point I had to kind of leave ballet behind and focus solely on breaking, but unfortunately that didn't last too long. Unfortunately, within 1 or 1.5 years after I started breaking, I was admitted into hospital to have a surgery on my shoulder. Doctors told me I wouldn't be able to dance ever again. I have a couple conditions on my body, which are since I was born, so that made it very difficult for me. However, after my surgery, I decided to actually give it a go, try dancing again, which led to the third photo that you see here. Just kept getting injured, kept getting other sort of injuries as well. So my body wouldn't leave me alone, basically. So anyway, I managed to have a career of 7-8 years, professional career in breaking, hip hop dance theater, performing, the commercial world, have a couple battles under my belt as well. But my body kept telling me that I have to do something else. I have to kind of transition. So I ended up transitioning to a scientific background. So I got into education, into becoming a physical therapist. I'm also sports massage therapist, dance scientist. I kind of dedicated my whole career into educating others so that they don't have to suffer the way I did and the way I'm still kind of going through some chronic injuries that unfortunately I have to live with. So yeah, all my work now has been for the last 8 years, since 2013, when I founded Project Breakalign, has been on educating others, doing research, translating that research into information that the community can actually understand. Because what's the point of doing research if it's only the researchers that actually read it? The community has to also understand it. So here we are today, Project Breakalign. The aim of this project was initially, and still is, injury prevention. So why do we want to prevent injuries? First of all, we don't want to seek cure. We want people to not get injured so they don't have to actually try to find the cure and healing. It's much easier if we don't get injured. It costs less. There's much less mental health problems involved. It just makes life much easier. Also, performance optimization. How do we expect to have optimum performance? How do we expect to be at our maximum, at the best that we can be if we keep getting injured? So these two are very directly correlated. So here you can see what Project Breakalign has been involved in and is still involved in. So this is the origin on the far left, top left, sorry, the research team. This is the original Breakalign research team. You can see a few familiar faces in there. We have created very good collaborations, for example, with the B-Boy Dojo, because we believe in teamwork. We believe that nobody can do something by themselves that is good. You have to work with teams, and many times you have to work with a lot of people. You have to mix generations, experiences, backgrounds, and have very good brainstorming techniques in order to get the best out of people to create optimum results. This is what we believe in. We've been in backstage battles for treatments. We have created education based on the research, community engagement, because we have to go to the community. That's our aim, because we come from the community. And of course, research. It's a research-based project, so research is it's really far up in our goals. This is just a little overview of the people that have passed from the Breakline team. They are not all part of the team right now. On the left, you can see all the B-boys and B-girls. You'll see some familiar names as well. And on the right, some people that are not necessarily B-boys or B-girls, but have a connection to dance or to hip hop. It's very important for us to have people that have like a double major. They're also B-boys and B-girls, and as well as scientists, or at the worst, they're dancers and scientists. It's important to bring both those qualities in so that we can have authentic research and knowledge coming out. So the pillars of Project Breakalign. Who are we? We're dance scientists, physiotherapists, doctors, sports coaches, epidemiologists, and statisticians. It's quite important for us to be dance scientists. And why do I say that? I will keep saying that today. It's important to not consider everything to be sports-based. Sports exercise science has many more years of experience and research before dance medicine and science was even invented. We do understand that, and we do get a lot of information from sports and sports medicine. However, this is a dance form. We have to understand that it has very special elements of aesthetics, of the movement pathways, the biomechanics, even the science, physiology. We need people who understand the dance in order to bring the best information possible that is adapted to the dance. So we do appreciate sports medicine. However, we are believers that we have to evolve dance medicine even more. So as I said before, scientists and B-boys and B-girls together, so 2 in 1, it's like an offer. So what do? We do research, we create education through awareness, we do treatment, we offer a free online injury advice service, we do community engagement, we offer jobs to people because that's very important, as you know. We offer professional opportunities and thesis supervision for students who are studying to become physiotherapists, doctors, and are interested in doing research on braking. And why do we do that? Because we have experience in that field. So why not mentor the people that have come after us? Why do we do this? We do this because there's very limited breaking specific research. And the second reason why, because there's very limited good quality breaking specific research. Unfortunately, people who review journals are not always the best to judge if a breaking specific article is good enough in breaking because they don't have this knowledge. So there's actually a big gap in that aspect as well. What does that result in? It results in articles being published that don't have very good methodology, and the conclusions are not very appropriate for the dance. So we are trying to help with this, and I have recently entered the board of directors of the International Association for Dance Medicine and Science, which is the biggest organization for dance medicine worldwide. And I'm really trying to make sure that we have some people and some things in place so that we can avoid having bad research being published. So how do we do this? All of this that I just mentioned, through research, through offering our breaking experience, and through dance medicine and science knowledge, because as I explained, it's very important to adapt any knowledge that we have on dance medicine and science, as well as be part of the dance medicine and science field. So the dance medicine and science field, there's a standard measures consensus initiative. What does that mean? I'll explain to people who may not be very familiar with science. This is basically a group of people that have been gurus in dance medicine. They got together, they got in a room, or they got in rooms for many months because it takes time to create that. And they created a consensus as far as injury, as far as how do we define injury, how do we collect data for injury, that basically anything that helps injury prevention in dance. So they created like some rules, let's say, that the rest of us doing research can follow. This has been published by the International Association for Dance Medicine and Science, as I explained before. And it's very important to be part of this field because that gives you this information like this SMCEI that I just mentioned. If you don't know about this one, you will probably use consensus coming from sports, which may not be as adaptable to dance. And this is why we keep talking about dance medicine and science. So it's important for people who are interested in this to be part of dance medicine science field through organizations, conferences, and not just the sports field, even though there's so much to learn from the sports field, and we understand that. So if we want to keep this dance form, a dance form, it has to remain a dance. That's why we choose dance medicine and science instead of sports. So the Breakline methodology. The research to create this methodology was funded by the Centre National de la Danse in Paris. It's a supplementary conditioning program for breaking. So it doesn't take the part, it doesn't replace the dance as such, but it actually hugs breaking from all conditioning perspectives so that we can prevent injury or reduce the risk of injury as much as possible. It was created through the biomechanical and physiological analysis of breaking, with a team of 15 of our specialists in our team. It was also pilot tested with qualitative data in 2017. It has been taught as workshops globally in breaking camps, universities, dance schools, and even before battles. And soon we will have a certificate for teachers, so keep an eye out for that. So why the Breakalign methodology? It's geared towards breakers. It was created for breakers. It was created via the analysis of this dance form. It's not something that we just took like a plank or something that comes from other things and we just put it in there. We actually took the plank and we transformed it in a way that is adapted to breaking. That's just an example. So it's very important to have breaking specific conditioning without saying that it's not also important to have conditioning that is not breaking specific. It was created, as I said, by dance scientists, breakers, physiotherapists, and doctors. It's firstly based on original research. So what does original research mean? It means that it's research that was done for the first time. And this original research was Breakalign research. So that's very important because we actually created this research through our own community. Secondly, breaking specific research, because we're not the only ones who do research, of course. So it's important to acknowledge others who have been doing this type of research and filter out, okay, what's good research, what's not, let's use the good ones. And of course, sport-specific research, because we can still get a lot of information from there, because there's still a very big gap in dance medicine. I'll give you an example about original and breaking specific and why we're so, we believe so much in like where we take the information from. On YouTube, we have like hundreds, maybe thousands of tutorials on moves. Like anybody can just upload a tutorial on a move. If you know the move and if you're part of the community and if you're an experienced breaker, you can see all those videos and filter out and say, okay, those 6 out of 3,000 are good. The rest, This is what we do because we have experience and we have this background. We can see the research and we can judge. Okay, that was a good effort, but that methodology did not adapt to breaking. So this is important to be acknowledged and understood, because then something that we have in research is people take maybe a methodology and they replicate it. It's something like biting, but if you actually acknowledge where you took it from, it's not biting. You're allowed to do it, and it's actually good to do it. But it's good to do it if the methodology was good. So this is why we insist on this. Lastly, something that really I'm really all about as Nefeli, we're honest and there's 100% transparency. Yeah, everything is true, everything that we say. So there's no hiding from us. So I'll talk a little bit about our research here. Our first study, biomechanics study in 2016, first publication. By the way, anything that I mentioned from now on has been published. And if you want the articles, you can give me your emails at the end and I can send you everything to read for free, no problem. So we evaluate, the article was about evaluating the relationship between fatigue, pressure, and weight distribution on the upper limb on breakers. That was the first study that was ever used on breakers, testing the upper limb. So biomechanics and using a force platform, which is flat on the ground, and seeing how the breakers basically adapt their weight, weight distribution and the forces that go through the hand while they're doing specific breaking moves. That was a very important study for us because it was the first time that we were actually using the upper limb in such a way. So we were also learning. What the findings of that study were was that fatigue, which means being tired, has a significant impact on the stability of certain foundational movements, such as the baby freeze, for example. So we did a fatigue protocol. The B-boys did some freezes, then they had a fatigue protocol, which means they went to their maximum of being fatigued, where they just couldn't do any longer because they were trembling. And then they redid straight away the same freezes that they did in the beginning. So we saw the difference between the two, the pre and post the protocol, basically. That's how we got into these conclusions. If you read the article, there's much more detail into our conclusions. Moving on, this was a study that was published earlier this year, injury occurrence in break dance. Yeah, the term breakdance was not my, unfortunately, I could not do anything about it. Some journals need some specific words to publish some data. So anyway, that was and still is the biggest global survey on breakers, covering injury epidemiology, meaning their training habits, injury habits, lifestyle habits, anything that can affect injury, be a causal effect, have a causal effect on injury. So some of our findings, I'll talk you through them here. So most of the B-boys or B-girls were training on wooden floors, and you can see the order of these floors: lino, marble, asphalt, carpet, or cardboard. However, it's really important to know that these are the surfaces of the floor. Do we know what was under the floor? Like, how many times have we seen linoleum being placed on a floor that is marble under it? Yeah, we don't really have enough research on breaking and hip hop on that, but there is a lot of research on sports and dance, and we really have to be careful with those floors we're using. At the time of the study, 40% of the breakers were injured, and 71% of them had a breaking related injury in the last year. That's pretty high in relation to other dance styles. That's probably the highest of any other dance style that has been published. This study showed us that the self-report time lost which means the time that the days that the breakers lost because of that injury. So the days that they didn't attend training or battles or performance indicate that breakers had less time off as a result of injury. And what does that mean? That probably means, based on other studies that I have done and other findings that I have, that b-boys and b-girls still dance when they're injured and when they have pain. And that's why their time lost is much less, which is not very good for the injury and for the rehabilitation of the injury. You can also see that the warm-up is of a much higher percentage than the cool down. So most of them do a warm-up, but very few of them do a cool down after they leave for training, shows, and battles, which again can be a causal effect causing injuries. Here you can see some more data. On the left, you can see the perceived causes of injury by those b-boys. You can see them in order. So the first one was insufficient warm-up, then fatigue or overworking, lack of conditioning, incorrect technique, and so on. So these causes of injury do make sense. And I think if you're part of the community, you can see that yes, maybe they are related to what you're actually experiencing every day. On the bottom right, you can see a table on the sites of injury on the body, like where they actually got injured the most in the last year. You can see that the neck, you can see the dark gray color, that's the one of this study. The neck is the first one, then it's the shoulders, then the lower legs, and then we go to the arms, the hands, groin, upper back. So we can see a very high prevalence of upper limb and upper body injuries in breaking, of course, because it's more upper body, it makes absolute sense. However, we do want to reduce this risk with all the injury prevention work that we do. And talking like qualitatively, we have managed to do this. We don't have the data yet for that because it takes time, and it's much more efficient when you have longitudinal data, meaning you get data for a long time. You don't just get data once, but you actually prove that over time something has had an effect.
Hi, Nefeli. You've just got a minute because you're 4 minutes over. But if you could
Okay.
take a minute, and we won't have time for questions. But thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm at the end. This is our last publication that happened last week, low back pain in breakers. I'll just be quick. This was the first study done in Cyprus, actually. Basically, a very high prevalence of injury as well. The most important thing to say here is that 90% of breakers were injured at the time of the study, and 100% of those had a history of thoracic and lumbar injuries, so at the lower back, which is quite high. These are a couple of book chapters that we have published. Again, I can offer those if you give me your emails. And we have some research coming up soon. This research will be published soon. Here you can see a video that we're collecting cardiorespiratory data, and b-boy spin is being funny during the data collection. I'll just move on. And in the future, just keep an eye out. We're recruiting in 2022, all of these aspects of scientists, basically. So keep an eye out if you're interested in joining us, and because we're providing opportunities. And thank you very much. Sorry that I ran over.
Thanks so much, Nefeli. No problem. We'll just take questions for Nefeli in the chat, and we'll get back to it after, so we can just move through the presentations first. So up next, we have Nick Robinson. Nick moved from Yukon to Toronto in 2007 to further his career as a b-boy and pursue his degree in kinesiology at the University of Toronto. He then took a few years off school to dance, travel, and battle. In 2017, he completed a Master of Science in Exercise Science at University of Toronto, I believe, where he utilized biomechanical methods to characterize the cellular response of muscle to exercise. Simultaneously, Nick worked to establish a business and began strength training many elite Canadian dancers. He also began working through the Canadian Sport Institute, assisting in building and delivering world-class conditioning programs for high-performance athletes. Presently, Nick runs a specialized training company with clientele including Olympic athletes, actors of productions by Netflix, Universal, CW, and Amazon, and a range of dancers. So I'll let you take it away, Nick.
Awesome. Can you guys hear my audio there? Perfect. Okay, so yeah, my name is Nick Robinson. Thank you very much for the intro, and thanks to everyone for being here today. I'm from a crew called Groundwork Sessions, or GWS crew, and we're from Whitehorse, Yukon. I'm also going to be the strength coach for Breaking Canada leading up to Paris 2024. So for today's talk, as we're just getting going on this project, I thought I would just give you an overview on myself, my history in breaking, b-boying, academia, and my experience in a applied setting. As well, going to be looking at my master's research briefly, because I have a captive audience here, so why not? And then just a quick overview of what some main aspects will be for us building the strength conditioning program leading into Paris 2024. So my beginnings, yes, as mentioned, I'm from Whitehorse, Yukon. Many of you may think that's not the most likely place for breaking to have taken hold, but it did, and it's still going strong there. I started dancing in 2013, or sorry, rather, I started dancing when I was 13. There was not much access to b-boying, of course. We had some VHS tapes and whatnot, but we were able to procure government funding. Actually, shout out to Andrea Simpson Fowler, as well as my mother, Catherine Poole, who helped us procure government funding to bring a crew from Toronto up to Whitehorse to teach us. That crew is called ABS Crew, consisting of Mariano Glizai, you guys may know him from Bag of Tricks, as well as Troy Whiplash and Roche Amendra. Here's some great photos of the Yukon, obviously, some mountains in the back, and yeah, we used to dance on frozen lakes. In fact, that there with the long hair and the tank top is me. Not sure what I was doing in the snow with the tank top on, but hey, when you're from the Yukon.
Hey, Nick, I just can't see your PowerPoint.
Oh, did I not share screen?
Yeah, let's.
Wow, hold on, tech issue. Sorry. So I'm trying to use my phone and my laptop simultaneously. Zoom, share screen. You want to be able to see that. There we go. I'll just give you those photos again because they're kind of entertaining. Here we go. Those are the photos I was talking about. Yeah, that's our crew there on the left. Since then, we've added some other members. And there's us on a frozen lake. I guess we spray painted on the snow. I hope it was biodegradable. Anyways, so getting into my journey since then, when I graduated high school, I was trying to figure out what to do, obviously, in university. Engineering was an option. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I loved human bio, and I just kind of had a knack for it. So I applied to kinesiology based on the fact that I loved human movement, obviously. I was b-boying it full-time. I was super passionate about it. And I loved human biology. So I thought it was a good combination. I applied to U of T so I could come to Toronto and break with the crew here full-time. And that's actually how I paid for school. So I paid for school by b-boying, doing shows, battling, etc. It was a really important time for me setting up what I do now, because it's when I really started to put connections together between kinesiology and breaking. And like mentioned in the previous presentation, there's a lot of sports science, a lot of research in sports, but not much in b-boying and b-girling specifically, and dance in general, especially in 2007 when I started school. So that was really important for me. I would literally be sitting in anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, and just like dreaming up how these things could be actually twisted and worked to work for breaking in general. I graduated from university in 2011. So from then to 2014, my crew basically traveled full-time internationally to battle. We lived in Vancouver for a year and kind of used that as home base. And I started working in the fitness industry full-time. And I essentially used working in the fitness industry to fund my ability to travel and battle and whatnot. In 2014, we moved to Toronto. And at that time, I started my own freelance training company, mostly because I wanted the freedom to be able to do what I wanted within the fitness industry instead of working for another gym, like a big box gym or even a private small gym. And I wanted the freedom to be able to explore kinesiology and training and strength conditioning and all those principles in relation to dance in general and breaking especially. In 2015, I decided to apply for a master's in exercise sciences. Not sure why I thought that was a good idea just after starting a company, but I did anyways, made for long days. I had the opportunity to be a teaching assistant for biomechanics, professional kinesiology, and physiology as well. So that was really nice. And it was actually a great tie-in to what I was doing in an applied setting. So literally going into the lab all day, going to school, teaching whatever, and then moving into a gym setting, working with dancers, etc. So some training highlights. So I've been working with dancers since actually before 2011. I worked with dancers in all disciplines, everything from breaking to ballet, contemporary, everything in between, as well as popping, house, hip hop, etc. I would say it's actually safe to say there probably hasn't been a week gone by that I haven't actually worked with a dancer in person or consulted, at least as far as strength conditioning is concerned. Some other just fun things I've got to do. I work for Netflix, so I work on a show called Jupiter's Legacy, which is a superhero show. They essentially just gave me the cast and said, make them look like superheroes and don't injure them. So that was fun. If you watch The Boys on Amazon, I work with 2 of those actors as well. And I've got to work with Universal and CW. So that's just some fun stuff I've got to do. I also work with stunt performers as well in injury prevention and strength conditioning. But the big tie-in to this project leading up to 2024 is my experience working with Paul Poirier and Piper Gillis for Canada's #1 ice dance team. And so we worked together starting in 2016. I'm the strength conditioning coach. And so we prepped from 2016 to 2018 for the Olympics in South Korea. And since then, we've been prepping for the 2022 Beijing Olympics, which are quickly approaching. So I look forward to really bringing in my experience working with them and the process of building towards an Olympic goal with the Breaking Canada dancers. As promised, I'll bore you just briefly with some of my master's research, but I find it interesting, so hopefully some of you will. I'm just going to present some measures we would use to measure muscle damage. So I studied muscle damage and stress due to exercise, as mentioned. Here is an example of some muscle damage. So this is morphology. It's actually a cross-section of a muscle. So we have a muscle sample, and we take a cross-sectional cut, a nice super thin one. It's pretty tricky to do. And then from there, we stain it. We react with our antibodies we want to look for the items we're looking for. And so you can see here, slide A is on a more macro scale, slide B is blown up, and that little round object there is a muscle fiber that's been damaged. And actually that arrow is indicating neutrophils, which are immune cells that have infiltrated that muscle fiber due to stress and damage. Same concept can be seen in slide C and D, and we can always come back and chat about these in the discussion. Here's another example. So you can see a nice, we actually call that a donut fiber with the hole in the middle and the neutrophil kind of swarming into the center of the fiber. And if you look down at slide D, that muscle fiber where the arrow is pointing and there's actually just a bunch of neutrophils, you can kind of see the outline of what used to be a fiber was likely damaged beyond repair. So for instance, in breaking or in sport in general, that is somewhere we don't want to go. And so these principles and the effects of stress are things that I definitely tie into my own conditioning programming for my clients and dancers and athletes, etc. Electron microscopy, so we use that to image muscle damage as well. So to give you an idea of scale, each of these squares here, each of these boxes is roughly 3 microns in width, and a micron is 1,000th of a millimeter. So it's quite blown up. Slides A and B, that's healthy muscle that hasn't been stressed. And you can see the horizontal lines are kind of nice and organized. And then slides C, D, E, F, you can see that the horizontal lines, which are actually called Z lines, they're they kind of separate the sarcomere within the muscle fiber. We can get into that later if we want. So you can see that those lines are no longer nice and organized. There's actually some streaming. So this could actually be what's happening in your own muscle. If you train too hard, you walk around and you're sore for more than 2 days after exercise, this would be the kind of thing we would see if we took a sample and took a look at it. Biochemistry, so we use biochemistry to analyze stress and muscle damage. In this case, we were looking for a protein in muscle called the heat shock protein, which is expressed following stress and damage. So essentially here you can see that the levels of heat shock proteins. If you look at the graph on the bottom, we had 15 contractions versus 25 contractions on both sides there. And actually after 15 contractions, heat shock proteins were elevated by 200% relative to controls, muscle that wasn't stressed. And after 25 contractions, lengthening contractions, we actually had a 500% increase in heat shock protein content. So just some interesting stuff from my research that I don't get a chance to talk about often. So I thought I would today. Force drop, of course, is a measure of muscle damage, and that's actually quite an easy one to do in an applied setting in a gym, for instance, or if you're working with dancers or athletes, etc. So force drop following muscle damage is certainly a marker of muscle damage and stress. And lastly, actually muscle fiber area. So if you take a sample of muscle following training or stress, the fiber area will actually change. So if you have a control or a contralateral, and then you have a stress or damage muscle and you take a sample, the fiber area, so if I just go back up to here actually, so each individual item here is a muscle fiber, and those fibers are running, again, out of your screen. Imagine like almost like a piece of spaghetti. They're nice and long and thin. And those muscle fibers there, we would actually trace them in the control and in the stress muscle and get a value for muscle stress as far as area of the muscle fiber, which increases due to inflammation, as well as circularity. They become more circular when they're damaged. So that's just some of the research that I did. I thought I would share that today. A general approach leading into Paris 2024. So again, we're just getting going on the planning for this, but some things to consider for anyone who wants to build a program, especially something over time, if you want to build something for a dancer or for yourself. So some key things to think about, of course, are performance optimization. That's a goal of strength conditioning. So we want to optimize performance, of course, through strength and conditioning. Injury prevention, of course, massive, especially in breaking. A lot of B-boys and B-girls experience injury quite often, so that's super important. And longevity, because in this case, the Olympics is 3 years out, and typically there's 4 years between Olympics. So, and we call that a quad. So within that quad, we want to create longevity because it's not a sprint. It's not like we're training for a battle that's in a month. So, and some things to think about in performance optimization, of course, force production requirements of or for breaking. Relative strength is super important. So how strong can we make a dancer relative to their own body weight? Physiological and metabolic requirements. So what are the stressors on the energy system through b-boying and breaking and b-girling? And if we look at, for instance, a crew battle versus a one-on-one, what are the differences in the requirements of the energy system? You know, if you take a round, say a breaking round or a battle round, it's roughly 30 seconds. So what energy system is working then? What energy system is working during recovery? And how can we optimize that depending on what type of battle we're going to be entering? Injury prevention, of course, so joint, muscle, connective tissue resiliency. Simple example there through strength and conditioning is we can actually build more resilient tendons and ligaments through conditioning. You can actually thicken tendons and ligaments and strengthen their attachment to bone. So there's an example of something that is super important through strength and conditioning there. Account for imbalances due to breaking, of course. So simple example here. In breaking, we're often in front of ourselves. We're pushing, you're in a stab, you're pushing into a freeze, you're pushing overhead, etc. We're rarely pulling. So super important to work on those muscle groups in the upper back while we're strengthening the front as well. That's just a really basic example, but these are things that will all be taken into account when building a program for a dancer. And longevity, so just items like progressive overload. We never jump into a training program off the bat. We progressively overload the system and create robustness to prevent injury, of course. Volume and intensity management. I think this is massive in the breaking scene because there's always this thought that you always need to be ready to battle, always have to be ready to go. And I think it leads to overtraining and a lot of injuries. So managing your volume and intensity, especially when you're working up towards something that's 3 to 4 years out. Nutrition and recovery, of course, enormous in longevity. And then I think a really important aspect for us is going to be establishing some sort of an off season for dancers to recover and rest. Again, we're not talking about a sport, we're talking about an art. But if you look at most sports, they have an off season, and that's super important to creating longevity and not having excessive wear and tear fatigue, etc. So yeah, that's an overview of myself and some research and what we'll be doing in general leading up to 2024. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone. I just want to share one more photo of Paul and Piper. This is them medaling at Worlds this year. So I was super proud of them, and I thought I would toss that up. And I hope for the Breaking Canada dancers, we can also medal at Worlds. So that's it. Talk to you guys in this discussion. Peace.
Thanks for that, Nick. That's a really great presentation, and it's a great overview of your research as well. Does anyone have any particular questions for Nick? Anyone in here at all? Just raise your hand or unmute yourself if you'd like. I'd turn off.
Hello, hi. I have a question for Nick.
Sure.
What does an off season look like? What is that supposed to look like for professional athletes?
That's a great question. It depends on the sport, or I'm going to use the term sport loosely, of course, like in this case, we're referring to art, but it depends on the sport, of course. A lot of off seasons have shrunk. So athletes used to take a longer off season. In this case, in general, you would talk about like a month at least of full rest, and then you may start gearing up again. So for instance, with my skaters, like they will take a month fully off. Maybe they'll just take a full rest mentally too, get some travel in, stuff like that. And then you will start kind of gearing up physically again, doing some light strength conditioning, mobility, yoga, whatever, before you get back on the ice. So you just have a period of time where you kind of remove yourself from your sport a little bit, you clear your mind, so it's a big mental rest as well. And then you kind of start to slowly gear back up into things for your season to start.
Fantastic. Does anyone else have a question for Nick as well?
Oh, yeah, maybe just a comment, just thinking about what you're saying. I can remember dancers saying things like, I took time off and somehow I got miraculously better. Do you know that kind of, the kind of shock people have in their own bodies when they've kind of taken a break from the dance, or they've gone to the gym maybe, or they've done some other activity and they come back and they feel stronger somehow, and that's always caught people off guard. Can you say a bit more about that? Feels a bit like off-season talk, but can you say a bit more about what's going on there in relationship, maybe not so much to sport, but to thinking about art and creation?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, that is definitely the case. I found that with a lot of dancers I've worked with, not just breakers. Because again, there's this idea that you always have to be training and always working. And it's part of my job to say, like, listen, like you need to take some rest and chill out. And 9 times out of 10, they come back, like you just said, like 2 weeks later, a month later, they're like, oh my God, I feel incredible. Like, you know, like this is healed up. This isn't hurting. Like I'm stronger. My power feels better. So I think that it's part of the culture to train excessively. It's a mentality, and it's in other sports as well. Like a lot of endurance type sports, so endurance athletes have a problem with that, and just taking the rest. But it's super important. I mean, the body needs time to recover. Taking a week or 2 off is not going to affect your dance in a negative manner. In fact, it's going to help. It's just convincing yourself and sitting down with someone who can break down what's going to happen in your body and how you're going to rebuild while you're resting to help that make sense. And I think that once someone experiences that, then it's much easier in the future to take that time and convince yourself, like, no, it is the right thing to do. So it's just experience and just trusting, like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. Yeah.
Awesome. Sorry, Mel, I think I may have cut you off. Did you have any other comments you wanted to make before we move on?
Oh, no. Because he mentioned, or Nick, you mentioned like how ice skaters rest, and I was wondering if that kind of looks like how you think, or in your experience, breakers should be using that time off as well, like similar to ice skaters, or?
Yeah, no, I absolutely think so. I mean, similar to most sports, because at the end of the day, if we break it down, like, you know, we're all different and our genetics are slightly different, but, you know, the physiology principles kind of stand in general. So like the recovery that an ice dancer or a hockey player or a bobsledder might have in the off season is going to be similar to what a dancer might have if they take some rest, right? So definitely really important. I think too, it's tough in breaking because there's not a season per se. I mean, there's always a jam you can enter. There's always an event you can go to and get down. So it's a little tough in that sense. And I think it's going to be important to kind of establish that. And for any dancer, even if you're not training for the Olympics, I mean, if you're taking your battling seriously, it probably would be good to look at your season and kind of map out like, this is where I want to peak. This is where I need to take rest, etc., just to help yourself actually get to the level you want to get to and without injury. So definitely similar to pretty much any athlete in that, you know, as humans, our physiology is all quite similar. Again, there's differences, but it's all quite similar. So you will recover similar to someone else from a sport. Yeah.
Great. We may have to stop the questions there, but please hold on to any other pressing questions for the discussion at the end of our final presentation for Nick. Thank you again, Nick, for that. If you don't mind giving up the share screen for our next presenters.
Yes.
I will introduce them now. So next up we have Sophie Manuela Lindner, who's the CEO of HEADS GBR and studied sports is a studied sports physiotherapist, specializing in dance medicine, working in the dance scientific field, and has been a B-girl since 2007, and is accompanied by Jens Nonnenmann, a B-boy since 2000, head of education at HEADS GBR, physiotherapist, myoflex therapist, and dance educator conducting dance-specific studies. I believe you're collaborating with two other academics, Dr. Nadja Schott of, is that University of Stuttgart, Germany, and Claudia Steinberg, the head of Institute of Dance and Movement Culture at German Sport University Cologne as well. Perfect. Okay, well, without further ado, I'll hand it over to you both and you can take it away.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction.
Thank you. It's getting dark outside, so I hope you will still see us. I will share the presentation to start off. A moment. Here we go. So first of all, thank you to Mary and Jason for having us and doing this great exchange project, I would call it. We're really happy to get in contact with many other researchers and have experts from the breaking scene. Today, we're gonna show you an insight on the study analysis and systematization of training practices, where we want to give a training recommendation for B-boys and B-girls in the area of flexibility, strength, and endurance. But first of all, Jason has already introduced me. I'm B-girl Sophia, representing MOT crew from Austria and Skill Sisters from Stuttgart, Germany, a B-girl crew from here. Due to many injuries, I became a physiotherapist. I'm breaking since 2007 and dancing since 99. So my life is a dance actually. And injuries always stopped me. And because of this, I really want to dig really deep into understanding the dancing body. And therefore I studied physiotherapy and specialized in many different dance medicine certificates. But at the end, I started doing clinical research because I understood that there is really limited research until now, especially in the breaking field. And yeah, and this also is one way why we have started HEADS. HEADS stands for Health Education for Dancers. And today you're gonna see one study we are conducting right now. I hand over to Jens.
Yes, and this is me. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having us. My name is Jens Nonnenmann. I'm also called B-boy Jenso, just Jens with an O in the end. It's easier to pronounce for some. I'm a B-boy. I started in the age of 9. I founded the True Crew, which is my crew here from Stuttgart, Germany, or all over Germany, actually. We represent since 2007 and to this day. Like Sophie and also Nefeli and probably many others, many other dancers with a medical background. I also started because I injured myself in a very young age. With 17, I had my first 2 surgeries on my knees and stuff. And yeah, but I'm still alive, I'm still breaking. I want to set a good example for the future, to show that with a intelligent and evidence-based approach, it is possible to maintain a functioning body throughout the whole range of motion, and also with very high intensity. And I'm doing great so far. I'm also president of the Urban Dance Health Association, which we founded. We are doing social projects regarding hip hop culture and dance education all around the globe. We have a nice documentary on YouTube. We can post that later in the chat. And yes, and and we're giving you a quick insight with a short trailer about our work with Urban Dance Health that we have been doing since 2012, actually, really traveling the world. We have been to many events, working as therapists backstage, or conducting workshops, or participating in lectures. You can also see snippets from our own projects, from our own competitions that we organized in Brazil, Philippines, Guinea Equatorial, and other countries that we have connections to and that we have an impact on, right? So we just, yeah, really try to apply all of our possibilities, you know, to the hip-hop, global hip-hop scene as well, to contribute for a bigger purpose, ladies and gentlemen. And here I pass the mic to Sophie again.
Okay, yeah, this was, maybe some of us know us from Urban Dance Health. Now it's a non-profit organization, and the education part and the research we conduct with heads. So we were really, really lucky to be in contact with 2 universities here in Germany. We collaborate with Professor Dr. Steinberg. She's the head of the Institute for Dance and Movement Culture of the Sports University of Cologne, and Professor Dr. Schott. She's the head of the Sports Institute of the University of Stuttgart. And together we formed the HEADS research group. HEADS members also are Bao Chaoyun or B-Boy Chaolin.
Also from my crew, True Crew.
And Luisa, big girl Luisa, she's also here from Germany. And our mission is really to get a know-how applicable on dance, especially on breaking, as we come from, and share it with the community.
Yes, as for now, it's 2021, and the reason why we gathered all here together is because breaking is becoming the first Olympic dance sport discipline, right? And of course, this is big news, and it entails many changes that are coming with it. It entails structural changes, and the need is getting stronger from all parties involved to have really a professional, evidence-based training system, and for all the squad members from all the countries, right? And through our research and our experience during the past few years, we already conducted few clinical studies, you know, and gathered a lot of data. And what we really found out is, before we can give any reasonable recommendations really for professional breakers for their practice, there's a lot of fundamental research that still needs to be done, you know, because it's still all in our experience as a physical therapist, and it doesn't make it much better than just my experience as a dancer or something, you know. That's why we really need to do a lot of research still. Sag ich das noch? Yes, that's why we are in this study, we are using a mixed method approach. The goal is to analyze existing structures of training practices of B-boys and B-girls, which means we need to look at how is breaking being practiced. Where is it practiced? At what time is it practiced? What do breakers usually do? Do they warm up? If yes, how do they warm up? Is the warm up actually efficient? And so on. There are so many factors. And a lot of those factors, we actually know it because we've been breaking for so long and we've been traveling so much, but there's no data about it, right? So we have to gather those data to see how is breaking really done? What are the most commonly used training strategies, right? And in the next step, we could give recommendations, really.
So actually, we are right now in the data collection phase. The Red Bull BC1 final 2021 happened beginning of November, and we conducted a pilot study with the participants. 7 participants participated, right? There were 4 B-boys and 3 B-girls, which were in the top 4 and the top 16 there. We are right now analyzing the data in order to then start the main study with national breaking teams, where we are already working with. So what have we done? As Jens mentioned, we used a mixed method research design, which means we are combining quantitative and qualitative research phases. The quantitative research phases are collecting data, numbers with questionnaires to really understand and get to know B-girls and B-boys. And the qualitative research phase, we get videos from the B-boys and B-girls, how they train and also how they battle. And afterwards, we start doing interviews in order to know exactly what was the approach behind. Why did they train on this day in that way? We're going to show you now a little bit how we are conducting this research. So this was an online survey we did with the Red Bull BC1 participants, where we asked them 3 times before the main battle happened. So we asked them for each training week, what was their perception of fitness on a scale from 0 to 10, what was their perception of stress, how many days they trained, and how was the intensity in general and daily, how long did they practice, and did they include some kinds of warm-up, and if yes, which form? Did they apply some recovery measures? And also what was their specific focus for the training week, in order to assess the whole 3 weeks until the important battle happened. The qualitative research phase is concerning the training videos and the interviews, where we have the videos, and in the first step we try to see if there are certain phases in all the participants and what are the training strategies in breaking. So for example, B-boys and B-girls typically warm up with top rocks. This could be a training strategy. So when we have put, well, we try to find some observation criteria. We are still in the process, where we first define what are the phases, how long each phase, and how long are the breaks from one phase to the next phase. And on the next step, we really look in detail. Is there a warm-up? Do they stretch? If yes, when do they stretch and how? How they are training new moves? Do they apply a cool down? If yes, how and what and when? Are they applying exercises to maintain their health or to improve the performance? What do they do? And is it useful, or is it actually counterproductive? So we really detect on B-boys and B-girls training strategies.
Additionally to the practice and training video material, we are also citing their battle material, of course. So we are looking at battle rounds from the same participants who took part in the study. of course, from the same event, but also from other events. Important would be that the general circumstances of the battle are more or less the same, such as it's always a one versus one scenario, and there is 3 rounds. So we took that as precondition for this one. And we just tried to look at each round, what is the duration of each run, and what does the run consist of? So how many seconds of the run is he actually performing top rock-like movements, or movements in the top rock level at least? Footwork, power move, freeze, and we added a 5th element just to cover the flips as well, because as physical therapists, we know that flips have an especially high strain on the lower extremities. So we also want to look at this and take it all into consideration to look at the total time that a break athlete right is performing during a battle, whether the duration gets shorter, and what energy supply they actually need, and what element they use the most in their battle, and therefore which strength form they would profit the most from, right? Because there's probably a lot of b-boys who spend a lot of time, for example, to practice power move in their daily practice, but in a battle situation, they need to mix it all up and make it an all-round round. So they have much more footwork and get tired much faster, and just to be able to detect stuff like this. Yes, so we really found out by citing some of the material already that that there is 3 big factors that play a role in giving reasonable training recommendations for individual b-boys or b-girls. First criteria would be the breaking elements they mainly use, whether they mainly use top rock, footwork, power move, freeze, or other elements, if there are any. It would be in what movement level are they mainly moving around? So are they mainly on their feet? Are they mainly on their upper extremity, which makes a huge difference on the whole biomechanical impact, of course. And as well, to differentiate it even further than only the breaking elements they're using, we also have to look at the style probably they're using. Like 1 or 2 decades ago, it was sufficient to say, well, there's 2 different styles, where you are either a styler or you are a mover. Nowadays, these styles have evolved. Of course, there were trends, other styles came in. We all know that there was flexible abstract b-boys, but nowadays they perished again because it all came together. So we have to look at also new combinations of styles, probably, at the evolution of it. Like I said, we have to look on the impact of the different elements. We have to consider like sports scientific training parameters, which are important for each element, instead for breaking in general, right? Because breaking is so big, it's such a complex art form, and right, it's not reduced to a certain amount of movements, and it's infinite movements. So we really have to at least look at foundational elements. And here you can see some of the breaking foundations, some of the moves that are most commonly, that most people agree on the names. We listed some of them for you here just to have a good imagination on what's happening there. So you have top rock, footwork, power moves, freezes, and like we said, we added tricks and flips as a 5th element, which is being used a lot by breakers, right? You could also call it tricks or blow-ups probably, but and here's the other aspect that I was talking about. These are the breaking levels. The breaking levels are another thing that really make breaking so unique and differentiated from all the other dance styles, I guess, right? Because in our list that we created here, if you look at level 7 and going downwards, then you go from the standing position, going to the crouch, to the kneeling position, slowly to the floor. So all the footwork level and down rock levels and backbone levels are down there from 7 to 12. And the air levels actually come from 1 to 7. You can see the air level on your hands, elbow, head, shoulder. And then we even differentiated chair and turtle level. Even it's more or less on the same height, it's still a completely different shoulder position that you are operating with. So we try to differentiate these. And so far we have 12 different braking levels with its own characteristic impacts on the biggest joints of our body, actually.
You're just a few minutes over, so just letting you know if you don't
That's
mind wrapping up
perfect.
soon. Thank you.
That's perfect. I'm coming to an end. This is the model that we're playing with, the different styles that we are seeing in the study participants and in the breakers that we are assessing. We are trying to differentiate as clear as possible, right? Traditional style would be like, I'm going to give you like b-boys, right? Who's a traditional style b-boy? Like, for example, Uzi Rock would count in this. He's a very extreme example because he has extreme lengthy rounds, right? So he has long rounds. He uses a lot of top rock and footwork patterns, which go on each side, which are mostly circular. So he has like he needs more of a strength endurance than, for example, a dynamic b-boy. Let's take Lil Zoo as an example. You know, you have many stop and go movements, many changes of levels, right? He doesn't stay on one level so much, but it's much more variety of levels in there. And it's just a completely different strain on their bodies, and therefore it would be another training recommendation. Powerhead is Lil G, flexible rubber legs, flexholic, Shaolin. Flow is Laos, Karim Barouche, Actual Force, Stacking, the most famous, we all know him. It's Rock's Right, or maybe somebody like Crumbs. And all of these styles just have very characteristic energy supplies.
And now we come to an end. Where are we now? So we conducted the pilot study at the Red Bull BC1 final. We are right now in the process of evaluating it, and we already see that there are also some bias. So the people getting the same questionnaire for 3 times in a row for every week. The second week they filled up, they did meditation and breath work, what they did the first week. So of course it has an impact, questioning the B-girls and B-boys. So we want to apply this in the main study in order to disminute the bias, which we will conduct beginning of next year. Then we need to evaluate the main study and really see what are the main training strategies in order to give recommendations on flexibility, strength, and endurance. And it's a really interesting work because it combines our passion and our experience and professionalism. So it's a really ongoing hard project for us.
A hard project, yes.
And we're really here also with the hip hop mentality, sharing is caring. So let's get in contact and discuss our study design. We're here to get in exchange. And if there are some questions, please.
Sure. Thank you so much for that very detailed presentation and breaking it down. Does anyone have any questions right off the bat for Sophie and Jens?
So I see Sarah was in.
Is there anyone have questions? Does anyone need to be unmuted?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Sure, go for it, Mary.
It's kind of a question for everyone, but Sophie and Jan, it's maybe a bit directed at what you were saying and what it made me think about. You mentioned that so much research is needed, and I feel really strongly about that and realize with your study, you won't be able to do it all. Nefeli as well doing research, that we need a lot more researchers asking a lot more questions. But I'm wondering if any of you are considering in your studies music. And so I've got 3 ideas here. One is amplification, ears, hearing loss. Is that anything that you're thinking about? Also musical taste and injury. So I know about 10 years ago, there were experimental psychologists looking at the relationship between music you like and how long you can endure pain. And I'm wondering if you're finding with any kind of testing or experiments around injuries, if you're having difficulty getting people report when injuries happened, and if there's something related to music and how music fits into this as opposed to other sports. So another dimension that maybe should be or could be considered, or music amplification or musical taste. And finally, music visualization and performance. This might be getting into the realm of psychology. I know a lot of you are maybe not going so much in that direction, but are you thinking about visualization in terms of performance optimization, or going in that direction at all with your research? So basic questions are music, hearing, the effects, and how that might interplay in your research.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a very good and interesting question. And we haven't included it specifically in our research so far. But you do ring some bells in my head. It's a really interesting topic because music is so strong connected to the actual physical performance, right? And I remember I was working in a physiotherapeutic clinic specializing on professional musicians for a few years. And there we had an assessment tool which let them play like one of their favorite. For example, we had many violin players, you know, so we assessed the scapulothoracal movement and everything with their favorite song being played and with the worst nightmare being played, right? And it really makes a huge difference in the pain reproduction and in the well-being. So this would be a big point. We're already touching it regarding the mental training. We actually do use music because it's you just right, you're imagining music in your own head anyways. Once you're visualizing as a dancer, right, you're dancing to a certain music most of the time probably. And yes, but it's a yeah.
What I want to add is also we are playing, like this is the one thing is the research, and the other thing is the trying out different training plans, programs. And we were playing with beat per minute for the endurance in breaking, because as we see in the round robin, you need to do about 20 rounds to win. So the endurance is a huge factor in winning the Olympic Games also. And there we have tried out different endurance programs in order to stay at a certain level, which is also nowadays music has changed also. It's also specific beats per minute. There we are playing around and applying different music lists, but also in the recovery phase where we do some HRV training, heart rate variability training, where we know at a certain beats per minute, the lung and the heart is synchronized and producing more DHIA, like recovery hormones, and the recovery is accelerated. So we are playing around, but not doing research specifically because our research topics are different at the moment. I would say like this.
Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Go for it, Nick.
Just like a side note on that, you made me think, Mary, with your question there about like if, for instance, playing music could help you, you know, train harder or withstand a higher output for a longer period of time. Maybe you might be interested in looking into. I'm pretty sure there's some evidence that actually shows that swearing can help you withstand more pain and actually like perceive pain less. So that could be a funny, like not funny, interesting starting point to even find that research and maybe see if there's some similarity there, something you could tie into actually like then jumping from music and like music you like. One is output and one is input. But anyways, just a random connection there. I thought could be interesting.
That's what I tell my patients while I treat them. They're allowed to swear. You know?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
There's probably some research on this, I bet. Sure.
Go for it, Nefeli.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because we don't have enough research on breaking, it's better if we kind of prioritize. And once music comes into play, there's a big bias and it's a factor that affects a lot of things. So I think it's better if we, although it's an amazing idea and very useful and probably will have like very good results, I think it's better to firstly like create some foundational research and then add that. However, we are preparing a study now where we'll be using beats, as in sound, but not music, in order to remove bias. Because then, okay, which music do you use? Does everybody have the same emotional connection to that music, or does somebody like it and somebody doesn't? So we're just using like sound in a specific BPM to start with, just to avoid bias. Can I also answer the questions that I've had in the chat now? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so
go for it. I think Eric had.
Yeah, I noted them down. So he asked me how accurate are the perceived causes in the study that I mentioned. Basically, because it was a self-report survey, those were the perceived causes. So that's what the dancers thought was what would injure them. It doesn't mean necessarily that this is what actually caused the injury. It's just what they thought as non-professional physios or non-professional doctors and all of that. So yeah, maybe it was a wrong perception, but we did use the Fit to Dance survey. The Fit to Dance survey was done like before the 2000s even. So there's a few Fit to Dance surveys, and we used that and we adapted it into a breaking population. So always it's better to, when you're doing surveys, to actually use a pre-used one and actually adapt, because you already have data to compare with. It's really better if you actually compare any findings you have in a study with previous studies, just to give a better translation of your information basically to the community. I also had another question by Luis. How did we define psychological causes for injuries generally? So in one of the studies, one of the perceived causes of injury were psychological causes. So that could have been anything between I wasn't feeling well that day, or I was upset, or I had issues at home. It can be anything like that. And we just put it under the umbrella of psychological causes. And last question that I had, sorry, somebody asked about the injury advice service. So that's a free service that we have, especially for people who cannot afford actually visiting a health professional. This is not a service that replaces the value of a health professional. That's of course of higher value when you see somebody face to face. We're just offering advice and not, cure as such. But if you email projectbreakalign@gmail.com, I can give you all the details on how you can use the service for free. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Nefeli. Did anyone else have any questions that they'd like to ask any of the presenters? Sebastian, please go for it.
Cool, thank you. How are you doing? Can you hear me?
Good.
Yeah. This one is like, it goes to all the presenters, actually, well, to the audience too, I think, if anybody's into dance science. So everyone here has used the term like basically injury prevention in breakers. And I just wanted to ask, like, why are we still using the term injury prevention and maybe not, let's say, risk management or risk reduction or like risk injury reduction or something on that sense, considering that, prevention would be like something like the objective of it would be the non-occurrence of getting injured. And that's not something that we can actually afford to do in the context of battle or training or, accidents. So I just wanted to know, like, which are the views in relation to that? Like, are we staying with the concept of injury prevention because of, let's say, to publish in journals or just to use it as a keyword, or is it something that is like actually you're basing your, I don't know, your current research on that? That's it. Thank you.
I'll give a short answer. So I just came back from the Olympics conference called Injury Prevention, prevention of injury and illness in sports. So the International Olympic Committee is still using the term injury prevention. So I think that's something significant to keep in mind. However, the dance medicine and science community are discussing in using reduction of injuries instead of prevention of injuries. So these two communities are having a very different approach, which is why I kept insisting on dance medicine before in my talk. I'll speak as Nefeli and Project Breakalign. I'm insisting on injury prevention because I have the most ambitious goal, which is to prevent injuries. Even if we know that the reality is that we probably reduce the risk of injury because some environmental factors may affect. For example, there might be water on the floor and you might get like spillage and you might slip and get an injury, for example. So then you haven't prevented the injury, you just reduce the risk with all the other conditioning and nutrition and sleep and whatever else. So we choose to be as positive as possible and just to believe that we will prevent injury, even if we don't in the end completely do that.
Yeah, just to jump on there too. I think that's a really interesting point. And from my perspective, if you wanted to kind of differentiate between, say, injury prevention and risk management, you might even look at it as in all the things that we're doing. So say physiotherapy, strength and conditioning, nutrition, all that. Those are means to help prevent injury prevention. Whereas risk management might be looked more at as the idea of like intensity of practice, volume of practice, looking at how fatigued you are when you practice. So that could be ways of managing your risk versus doing things to try to help prevent injury. And then that's just kind of how I would think of that off the top of my head. And then by combining those two, hopefully you can stay healthy. But anyways, just a thought.
I will also give my 2 cents to this. It's a really good question. I think if I were to answer your question, Seba, I would probably rather call it chronic injury prevention, because I think what also Nefeli meant to say is that the like acute injuries, like accidentally happening during performance in a battle, are probably rather rare if you look at the statistics, right? I think most of the injuries that occur to dancers or b-boys and b-girls especially, they materialize over a long period of time, right? Like degenerative processes in the joints, in the cartilage, and stuff like this is very common. And I do believe, well, we do believe that it's possible to prevent these with a very specific training plan, but we are not able to say yet how it looks like, you know. But that's our approach, because we think a lot of the most of the chronic injuries that dancers suffer from are related to technical faults or to mobility, a lack of mobility in their joints, you know. And I think if you look at the foundation of each basic element, like at foundational movements that no dancer can avoid when breaking, once you got them clean, this would be the best injury prevention one could do. This is our approach to this. I hope I made myself clear. I had to search some words in my head. I'm sorry.
Oh, nice. Thanks a lot for everyone.
Fantastic. Was there any other pressing questions from the many participants here?
Oh, Sebastian, you go. Do you have another question?
Did you have another question, Sebastian?
I had a couple of questions actually, but if there's anyone else who needs to say anything, I'm up for waiting a little bit. It's all right.
I think you've got the floor, or you can take the floor away. Yeah. Oh.
Okay. Now, I just had like a question in relation to what's going to happen as we're discussing Olympics right now. I saw that the World Dance Sport Federation also published a picture of Paralympic sports. And if anyone over here has any idea of what's going on with that, if there's actually going to be para dance sport considered in breaking and into which modalities? Because, well, it came around as a question when Nefeli was speaking about the floor, for example, and an accident, and it came to, accessibility to training spaces and, studies like that on that genre of disability and inclusion in a general sense in breaking. I just was wondering if you have any information or if there's any work being done right now in relation to breaking and people with disabilities at this moment into para dance sport, for example, if there's like any insights into that.
There isn't, to my knowledge, at least, but I would expect that they would not start two things at the same time. I think they wouldn't start the Olympics 2024 and Paralympics at the same time. But yeah, I'm not aware of something.
Is anyone else aware of the progression with the breaking in the Olympics and how it is associated with the Paralympic Games as well? Has there been any news amongst the community? No? We'll soon find out.
Yeah, on my side, I had I have been told that you first need like a critical amount of people participating into the sport, in this case sport, dance sport. But yeah, I don't know how are, for example, the numbers in different countries in relation to inclusion of people with disabilities into breaking as itself. Let's say apart from inabilities, for example. So well, I think it's an important thing to have in consideration. Yeah,
for sure.
The thing with the numbers is that I think nobody's taking account of who is considered to have a disability. Like, I think the only thing that our culture is keeping numbers of as far as this is like the rankings and how many people, which country they're from, and all of that. But I would consider there is nothing on disability, at least not to my knowledge. And somebody like as me, that have a physical impairment, which is not visible to people, nobody has ever contacted me, and I have put this out into people. So I would assume there's nothing.
Was there anyone else with any questions that'd like to ask our three presenters? Mary, you've got another one. Go for it.
I've got another one. And it's just around a distinction between sport and dance. So Nefeli, you raised this, and Sophie, I'm sure you guys are thinking about this as well. So what are the specific research questions that relate to dance and not sport that where you're shifting towards? So what kinds of research questions you have that apply to dance but not to sport specifically?
Well, when in each sport specifically, things have become very regimented within the science. So because they have been researching each sport for such a long time, and with so many resources and facilities and so much money to actually support that, they have people have managed to create methods and to actually create good research that is based on the mistakes of the people who did research at first. Within dance, we can use some methods of sports, but we see many times that it's not applicable to who we have in front of us. So I'll give you an example. One of the latest study that I published last week on low back pain in breakers and hip hop dancers, I used an injury definition. That injury definition I took from sports. Actually, I was kind of doing an experiment. I took it from sports, and it basically said that an injury is considered something that keeps the dancers away from training for 24 hours or more, for an incidence of at least 2 times in the last 3 months. Because breakers and hip hop dancers generally, they just want to keep training and they want to keep battling, and even if they're in pain, they will still go and battle because they don't care, they just want to go. Many of them said that even though I had pain, it didn't keep me away from training. I still trained with pain. So then they were actually not applicable to my definition that I chose. So then I had a very low group of chronic low back pain because they just kept dancing with their pain. So that makes us think, okay, so then this definition that actually is one of the top in sports, that in like elite sports, doesn't work within breakers. And actually in my sample, I had a lot of elite breakers. So then we have to adapt to this group of people. You see what I mean? Like we have to create an injury definition that they can relate to. And now I'm at this point that we have to create something for this dance genre and not just take it from somewhere else. Just an example.
Yeah, I also want to go with Nefeli that breaking is both actually. It's not only a dance, it's not only a sport, because it's a high impact. And because of this, I think also we need to see what is around, but still we're kind of pioneers in this area and need to try to set new standards or categories as we are trying with the movement levels, the elements, and the styles, because there is not only the movement, but also the dance aspect, which also will be part of the judging system they are working on right now, because as it goes to Olympics, it's really important to know who will win and why he won. So the one thing I think is really, really important to really get the judging system out and make it really good. But on the other hand, to really set new categories in order to assess the dance in our breaking and still apply what we know from the sport science to the sporty things, but don't copy and paste, because I think we are also a creative community, but still we need to stick to the research rules. So that makes it also really complex, but interesting at the same time.
Yeah, just to add on there too, a couple things like, so I think like in my experience, most athletes who are training at like an elite top level are for the most part working through injury. Like for instance, the skaters I work with, there's always something. You know, most athletes have some sort of ache or pain or overuse injury, but I think a big difference in breaking and in dance in general might be access to treatment for that. So that's a big thing. And, you know, having breaking come into the Olympics hopefully starts to open up doors for funding and all that. The other thing is, you know, of course, there's less research in dance as far as physiology and all that strength conditioning goes than there would be in professional sport. But we can draw on things that are similar that might not seem that similar. So for instance, like as far as like movement and research in injuries and structural injuries and whatnot, things like martial arts or like even MMA, you know, we can draw on some of that research a little bit. You can kind of take pieces that work from breaking, or even a random example, but if we're talking energy systems, I mean, like research in metabolic processes in hockey players. I mean, hockey players, they're on for 30 seconds. It's a 30-second shift. Sort of similar as far as an energy system is concerned to breaking. So you can kind of start to draw from research that has been done. I know there has to be more specific stuff to be done, but that is kind of a tool I use. I'll go look at certain research, and I'm not looking at the whole body of it. I'm just specifically looking at the energy system, say in hockey. Obviously, like playing a shift is not the same structurally as like throwing around, but anyways, just thought there.
I think we also, you know, shouldn't be afraid to make use of it, you know, because sports science has gone such a long way, man. There's so much knowledge out there, right? The players in the sports disciplines, these people are so professional. They are so profoundly fit and well trained and well nutritioned, and they have their sleeping schedule and everything, you know. So we can, I think it's also sometimes, especially for us, through the view of a dancer, right? It's a very sensitive topic sometimes. But really, as medical professionals, I think it really makes just sense to use all of the adaptable, concepts out there and try to adapt them as close as possible to breaking. And I think it's not it's not so much a question whether it's a sports or a dance thing, but I think the more specific it gets, the more it is a dance thing, right? Because it's about the dance that we're doing. And yeah, just really taking screening batteries, taking concepts, taking nutritional concepts, and try to make adaptations, get it as close as possible, make it work. Right?
Does anyone have one last question just before we end formally? I know we're a bit over, but I just thought the conversation has been so good, I'd just let it go. But does anyone have any final pressing questions? Just before we end the recording, so we cut it at around an hour and a half for the recording's sake. Does anyone have any final questions? I have a final question, if no one else does. I'm just really interested around I can't remember who mentioned it in this last conversation, but it was about access, and I think the idea of injury prevention and the sports science and the dance science, the science behind dance in particular, is something, as you have all mentioned, is quite a new field. What kind of if I guess this is getting a little bit ahead of the moment, but there's obviously going to be a broad inequality in the resources in terms of research, specialists, sports scientists around the world. Are you all going to be working across the world to be doing workshops with other people? What do you see the future of this sort of work looking like as we approach the Olympic moment? And that's to everyone on the panel. I'm just kind of curious where you think it's going to go.
I would say it depends. I mean, the Olympics are complicated, and having been at the conference last week, I would say like being part of that depends on a lot of factors, which we cannot always control. However, whether the Olympics exist or not, I think everybody on this panel will keep doing the work that they have been doing before the Olympics. And that's my aim as well. And I think, of course, we all want to be involved within the Olympics, whether that is within our country or within, more of a global perspective, which would have been good. But I think the future is unpredictable, and there is not enough transparency within the Olympics. So I don't think I can say anything more on that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question for sure. I think already, of course, the Olympics, each country is going to have different funding structures, and each country, their goal is to medal and all that. But I think that even this conversation that we're having today is an example of why breaking might be a little bit different from other sports, if you will, or Olympic forums that have taken place, just because of the nature of hip hop and the whole idea of sharing and building and growing. I can't see if another sport was announced tomorrow that it's going to be, I use the term sport loosely, but was announced tomorrow that it's going to be the Olympics. I can't see them all getting together and having a conversation with people from different countries and sharing knowledge and ideas. So I think it is different, but again, each country's goal primarily is to medal. So, but yeah, I think definitely I'm already seeing differences compared to other disciplines. So it's cool.
I give my 2 cents again. I also think that, this new age of breakers, right? This new generation, this new era of breakers coming up right now with a completely different mindset than the people who started breaking 15 years ago or something, or even more, I think this is the time where the society or the breaking community gets ready to learn more about the knowledge, more about health, more about performance optimization, because our experience was also that breakers never wanted to know anything about that because it's not part of the culture. Right now, the culture changes a lot. And I think we will see how much it really manifests in the Olympic structures, right? On how much really institutions are going to take up education programs for therapists to do break-specific therapy. Let's hope for that. I don't know if it's going to go there, but I do think that it's going to make a change in the mindset of the global breaking community, and it's already happening right now. You know?
Yeah, this is what we experienced, that the athletes, the breaking athletes now seek out for knowledge. They ask themselves much more, and also the event organization is changing. That helps a lot, because I think it's a huge opportunity for us physiotherapists or other healthcare workers to have some spotlight on the health of the artist. It should be a standard that every breaking event has their backstage healthcare services. Right. And now I think there are the possibilities to get some fundings for research. I'm not so sure the fundings, it's a slow process, but every national team should have their own doctor, physical therapist, nutritional advice, and so on. And we are part of it. So of course we are trying to set the standards for the future, for the next generation, because if we are being part of the Olympics and will be again part of the Olympics, we're talking about 8, 12, 20, 30 years, which is coming. And I think we are really have the advantage to be here at the time it's changing, knowing how it was before, and trying to do our best to really be a good example and make a lot of structures in order to change it in a positive way.
Thank you all for those responses, and I think that's a really good place to perhaps end it. Did we have anyone else in the chat or any final questions that I missed? Dominic is here. Dominic, yes, quickly, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I think my question is kind of pretty good connected to what Sophie and Jens just said. Like for me personally, I'm a more younger dude. I'm 20 years old and I'm not breaking for that long as some others maybe here. And I just wanted to ask and touch on the topic pain, because I think when you start breaking, you kind of have to learn to withstand pain. Like for example, when you're doing windmills, your shoulders get bruised a lot, and you kind of get you have to just get through that. And it's like when boxing, you gotta toughen up your fists to be performing better. And I think that could maybe connect to breakers afterwards, kind of trying to train through injuries and thinking of pain as they gotta fight through it. Rather than accepting pain for a kind of exclamation mark of the body and telling you gotta work on something, you gotta stop doing this or that. And I just wanted to ask if what's your opinion on that?
I'll jump in here if that's right. Yeah, I think that's a really cool question. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you're working through pain a lot. Especially when you first start, things are getting used to it and whatnot. I would kind of use the term too, like differentiating between pain and discomfort. So say you're learning mills and you're bruising your shoulder up, maybe you're cutting it open, whatever. That's discomfort, it hurts. But is that an injury? Like is your shoulder bruising really a bad thing, or getting a cut as long as it doesn't get infected? Not so bad. So it's kind of learning to differentiate between discomfort and pain, and also injury and not injury, right? If you feel something pop in your knee, I'd be a little more alarmed than if you feel your skin rip on your shoulder blade. So I think it's like educating people about things to watch out for, how to monitor your body, and aspects you can work through and aspects maybe you should lay off and not work through.
All right. Sorry, Mary, jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much to our presenters for coming out. I know everyone's really enjoyed hearing about your research and all of your community projects as well, how you're always working on integrating this with the hip hop communities around the world. It was really inspiring to hear about that work. So yeah, thank you to all our presenters. Thank you to Jason and to Hannah, who's helping us behind the scenes as well today. Jason, I don't know if you want to say anything else before we wrap up. Hi, Rebecca from Scotland. It's always good to see you here.
Yeah, thank you all of the panelists for sharing, all of your research, all of your experiences, and sharing it with the community today, and for the community showing up and getting involved and asking questions and looking for the information. I think it's been a really, really good session. We'll probably have to end the session here. We are looking forward to catching up with everyone. If you have pressing questions, please get in touch with our presenters today. Their research and this community is going to be, appearing more in the future, so come along. Our next session will be on the 5th of Jan if you're interested in joining us, or if you have people who'd love to join the community and learn some more, or exchange ideas, or just have an interesting perspective to share. We'd love them to come along. But yeah, thank you everyone for today. It was a really insightful and wonderful panel.